And we turn now to Japan, where a tragedy of unprecedented scale seems to be unfolding. Reports have been flooding in all over the country. Children ranging in ages from 8 to 14 have been admitted to hospital with symptoms ranging from severe headache, stomach infections, to unconsciousness and delirium. We're currently awaiting a statement from the Prime Minister, but in the meantime, local police in all regions of Japan are urging parents to monitor their children for any signs of distress. The cause of this catastrophe remains unidentified, though bioterrorism has not been ruled out. For more on this phenomenon, we turn to former MI6 Deputy Director Mark Engelstrom. So tell us, Mark, what could possibly affect so many of Japan's children?
It's the cusp of nightfall, in that hazy time that lingers between late evening and the dark of night. Detective Satoshi Tanaka is about an hour short of clocking out for the night when all of a sudden, an emergency. His sergeant bursts open his door. Reports from all over the Kansai region are pouring in. Parents, doctors, and emergency room techs are logging an alarming number of children presenting with an impossibly wide array of physical and mental afflictions, ranging from minor issues such as nosebleeds, light muscle aches, irritability, and drowsiness, to hysteria, cluster headaches, hallucinations, and at worst, let's just say successful attempts to self-teleport to the negative zone. 200 of these in one night, to be specific. Tanaka immediately jumped into action. What to do? What could cause this? Terrorism? Pandemic? Some sort of hypersonic weapon? Tanaka and Kyoto PD staff found themselves dumbstruck. This puzzle didn't make sense. All these kids were at home, many of them preparing for bed when they began exhibiting symptoms. What the hell is going on? Detective Tanaka wondered. There must be some causal link to something external. What kind of weapon or virus could cause this wide of an array of ailments? As the staff at Kyoto PD spent the night making phone calls, squeezing informants, and following up leads, finally, information began to trickle in. Almost every child affected had spent a considerable portion of the previous day obsessively playing a new video game entitled Pokémon that was the latest brainchild of the renowned Japanese gaming giant Nintendo. More specifically, it seemed that the onset of the maladies, psychological disturbances, and hallucinations coincided with each player's arrival at Shiontan, better known to Western players as Lavender Town. Without a doubt, Detective Tanaka found himself alarmed, confused, and on edge. But despite these surreal circumstances, Kyoto PD didn't hesitate, swiftly securing a late-night summons from a magistrate judge. The goal? Bring in senior staff of Nintendo and Game Freak without delay to help unravel the origin of what might be a mass casualty event spreading across Japan at an exponential rate. At around 2:30 a.m., Nintendo CEO Shigeru Miyamoto and lead Pokémon composer Junichi Masuda arrive with counsel in tow at Kyoto PD headquarters. They are both guided to separate interrogation rooms where Detective Tanaka was waiting. How did this happen? Was it deliberate? Who is responsible? I need answers, he stated. Moreover, Tanaka and Kyoto PD wanted to know, with Pokemon Red and Green already extensively distributed across Japan, what actions were Nintendo and Game Freak going to take to mitigate this crisis? Time was of the essence, and based on news reports that were starting to air around the country, the situation was escalating. During the course of the interrogations, Masuda confessed that the development of Pokemon, although now seemingly an enormous success, had brought Game Freak to the brink of bankruptcy more than once during production, despite the backing from Nintendo. He also admitted to Detective Tanaka that the game's data, developed on the notoriously unpredictable Unix Sun Spark Station 1, had teetered on the edge of oblivion several times during production, pushing his mental state to the brink. Detective Tanaka was not satisfied. How does this relate to Shiontan? How could these development challenges have possibly led to the harrowing events unfolding in the dark of night across Japan? And most importantly, he asked, did you do this deliberately? Masuda then confessed that Lavender Town, with its nature of housing the Pokemon Tower and the graves of deceased Pokemon, was always intended to have a darker theme. However, somewhere along the way, influenced perhaps by his own depression, despondency, and fear, Masuda had, whether consciously or not, significantly amplified the dissonance within the piece. This was particularly notable in the ghostly high-pitched 8-bit square wave that sets the eerie tone at the beginning of the piece. Enough talking about this. I need to listen and understand what is happening, Tanaka stated forcefully. And so, a copy of Pokemon Red was brought to the station. Masuda, as he had some skills in coding, was able to jerry-rig the game to skip ahead to Lavender Town. Detective Tanaka listened, and nothing really happened. He took the headphones off, but before he could shout at Masuda, he did notice something. He stumbled slightly, and gradually noticed that he now had mild, though not insignificant, tinnitus in both ears, affecting his sense of balance. He immediately grabbed Masuda by the lapels and shouted, "Fix this now before this game escapes into the rest of the world and more children are endangered." Masuda, along with Miyamoto, acknowledged that they understood and left the police station around 4:50 a.m. In response to the unfolding situation, the next morning, sales of the new Pokemon games were immediately halted. A mandatory recall was issued, urging all current owners to return their game cartridges as soon as possible. Not wanting to create a bad PR storm for Nintendo, their press department stated it was simply due to a programming flaw in the first run of cartridges and promised a prompt replacement with corrections added. Behind the scenes, Junichi Masuda quickly addressed the real issue, meticulously stripping away the high-pitched spectral whine from the original Lavender Town theme, yet leaving its melancholic melody and structure intact, so as not to take away from the haunting nature of Lavender Town itself. Following a more rigorous round of testing, Pokemon Red and Green were re-released in Japan, now featuring the revised Lavender Town theme music. This corrected version was then adopted for the subsequent European and North American releases of Pokemon Red and Blue, and going forward, there were no further reports of children experiencing illnesses or possible self-teleportation tendencies. But why did all this happen? How could a piece of music be responsible for any of this? Well, lucky for all of you, in addition to being slightly deranged, I am also a bit of a musician, so I can actually provide some theoretical explanations as to why Lavender Town's music had these seemingly paranormal effects on children. First, it's essential to note that Lavender Town's theme begins with an eerie, skeletal 4-note pattern known as an ostinato. For those less versed in musical terminology, let me break it down real quick. An ostinato refers to a melody or harmonic sequence that persistently repeats either indefinitely, at predetermined intervals, or as a constant musical accompaniment. Since this ostinato sequence is built around the highly dissonant interval of a tritone, infamously known as a diabolos in musica, this unsurprisingly imbues the piece with an immediate sense of darkness and foreboding, with some listeners even describing it as demonic. However, contrary to some assertions made here on YouTube, this song is not, in fact, atonal. While it does eschew settling on the root note of the key, the harmony within the composition firmly places Lavender Town's theme in the key of E minor. This becomes even more pronounced if we artificially append an E natural to round off the ostinato. Returning to the theme of dissonance, however, there's an ubiquitous crunchiness when we align the left hand and right hand patterns of the theme. Analyzing both hands together, we hear an unmistakable sense of dissonance falling on both strong and weak beats. For those of you who aren't musicians, pleasant intervals are usually thirds and sixths, and they sound like this, while more dissonant ones, such as in Lavender Town, are seconds and sevenths, and they sound like this. This continuous presence of dissonance juxtaposed against the backdrop of a straightforward E minor key, and with the 8-bit nature and crunchiness of the synth sounds, this is what imbues the piece with a continuous sense of instability and eeriness. Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention there is in fact a facet of Lavender Town that, despite countless YouTube analyses over the years, has been conspicuously overlooked. Listen closely as I play the left-hand part of Lavender Town's score. Hear anything familiar? Let me help you out. That's right, the underlying chord progression in Lavender Town bears a striking resemblance to that of Aerosmith's Dream On. The transformation of the musical style of Dream On, a song of limitless hope, into an anthem of melancholy, eeriness, and hopelessness, is, when you stop to consider it, even somehow more creepy than before. In addition, people often point out Masuda's classical influences, and while they're not wrong, he often stated his love for Stravinsky and Shostakovich. What often goes unnoticed in analyses of the Lavender Town syndrome is Masuda's incorporation of traditional Japanese folk music into the score. Besides its harsh dissonance and subtle reharmonization of Aerosmith, if you listen carefully, you'll find that the folk song Sakura Sakura echoes throughout the DNA of Lavender Town. It's not exactly note for note, but the similar use of the Japanese pentatonic scale, specifically the Hirajoshi scale, underpins the entire musical framework of Lavender Town. And so this, my friends, the dissonance, the eerie harmony, the Japanese pentatonic scales, the accidental binaural phenomenon, the 8-bit skeletal tones, all these elements came together in the sound card for Pokemon Red and Green and threatened to overtake the children of Japan with sickness and madness. And left unchecked, the inadvertent demonic sonic energy of Lavender Town's music could have affected millions of children worldwide, plunging all of humanity into utter chaos and madness, and even civilizational collapse. And the craziest thing is, all of this really happened on Earth 3, in a turtle's dream, in outer space, possibly. Okay, yes, you got me. If you didn't realize it by now, Lavender Town Syndrome is not real, but a legendary creepypasta that became popular about 10 years ago that I just so happened to revisit recently for nostalgia purposes. And while I was looking over the original Lavender Town videos from 10 years ago, I realized there is something about this phenomenon that's still worth dissecting all these years later. The diverse musical influences, the strange effect 8-bit sound compression has on the harmonic structure of the song, and the honestly jarring nature of some of the high-pitched tones are quite unsettling, and honestly I had to take my earbuds off a few times. And while this may not be the equivalent of plunging into madness, the music of Lavender Town still to this day certainly has the potential to provoke a sense of unease and even horror. But again, as I said, the important thing to remember is that Lavender Town and its music can't hurt you. Yet.